So hello, Gregory, Zach, and Danny.
Hello,
Hello.
Jeff.
We've got a full crew today.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we've got three people here. Three people here that are very good at writing adventures, and I consider myself in good company, and I'm able to take some notes. So yeah, so
Thank you.
we yeah we've Zach has a number of titles under his belt, under his pen, and Danny and Gregory's had a few, and Danny's got, let's start with a gentle meander, but we'll talk about later as well.
Yes. It's a
So
good start for sure. So
when it comes to, I guess for adventure design, because that's really, it's not always straightforward, because right, we always, I remember starting out, it's like you kind of think, yeah, I got this. This is the easiest thing. And then you actually go and write it, and then it's not such a greatest thing. And then you try and run it. But more importantly, is, when you have an idea and you run it, it may work for you, but the idea is, how to communicate that to the person who'll be running your game so that they can get that experience. Because there's a lot of information when we're writing our own notes for our own games that we don't include, but I think, but we need to do that for other people. So I guess the idea is discussion. Maybe Zach can kind of start out with talking about, like, maybe the basics or the steps or initial thoughts of how do you get started.
yeah. So I thought like this is a really good topic for this evening because and we'll talk about this later, but we've got a couple of Kickstarters that are right now, and Greg and Danny are on both of them as writers of adventures on both of them, but they're wildly different scales of adventure from one to another. And I think that's where I would start, is that I think that there is not one way
Mm.
of communicating an adventure. There may be one way for you to communicate an adventure. There might be an ideal way for Greg to get his ideas onto paper and get them understood by somebody else. But but really, that you're not doing it wrong by writing a 40-page adventure that should be a one shot, and you're not doing it right to try to pare it down to 400 words. Um, it's really more about what is the ideas that you're conveying, and can you convey them? And not only that, is it enjoyable for the GM or the reader in general to parse your words? Because most adventures that get bought are never ran. So there has to be a value in the perusal and kind of like, to use Danny's word, the meandering
Yeah.
of moving through an adventure as a GM or as a reader in general.
Yeah, and I think, looking at the manuscripts from both Gregory and Danny, I see there's both similarities, but also vastly different in far as style goes. I mean, just no different than an author. People have their own personality comes out into their work.
What what do you think your style is, Greg?
Whoa. That's a good question. My style is to try to give a very good visual picture of what's going on throughout the adventure so that the game master knows hopefully knows what to present to the players, and that the players know what they're seeing and how to react to it. So and hopefully, I was going to talk about the concept of railroading later on. You don't want to set things up so that it railroads, but because you always want to leave room for creative solutions. But if the players have a very good idea of what the situation is, their creativity is going to fall within kind of the bounds of what you see for that situation. So I try to be fairly concrete in my adventures, and as a result, they tend to run kind of long.
Concrete. I would say also someone who's read a few of your adventures that like it's concrete. And I think you said long, but I think part of that is you like a visual toolkit.
Mhm.
So make sure that there are many things, or at least several things, to describe in various corners of the room or in the set, just engagement points visually, or multiple NPCs, or a
Mhm.
heavy amount of characters to interact with, just player choice through
Mhm.
detailed options, if that makes sense.
Indeed, and occasionally the red herring or two, because so I'll throw out a concept of game design, the law of conservation of detail. Um, we tend to only discuss things that are significant. In works of fiction, a good work of fiction will not waste 20 pages describing the table settings at a dining room table that the characters are passing through the dining room on the way to something else, because it's not important. Um, so players, if you say you are in a 20 by 20 room and there's some broken furnishings and there's a dull tarnished brass sconce on the wall. And the players will be like, oh, well, is there a torch in it? Do I take the torch out? Do I rotate the sconce? Because you provided one specific detail, right? And so I
Yeah.
like to provide details of several different things so that there isn't necessarily a clue as to what the important thing is in that setting.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's 100%. Like, I think that's very much a hallmark of your stuff, is lots of things to chew on, and some of them are actual things and some of them are not. Danny, what about you? What do you think what do you think or what do you prioritize in adventure design?
Um, I probably prioritize the characterization of my NPCs or my,
Mm.
they're not necessarily foes. I think foes probably are the most fun to write though. So if I just limited myself to one thing, I'd say, it's the creation of interesting um adversaries. I don't always get there, but that's always my goal. And I think recently I've probably broken that out into locales, events, entities versus just foes, things like that. And I try to make them, at least most recently, something that I can describe in 3 prompts and then in 2 sentences. And then we go from there. And a lot of times I feel like I want to put the rest of that in an appendix. So I'll just say, Prince Vlad, he's cunning, charming, and ruthless, and he was brought up on the streets of this place, which earned him a reputation as this or that. And that's all I'll really say about it right there, because if somebody needs to run it, I would guess Greg or Zach or Jeff could run from that description, you know
Yeah.
so I don't feel the need to like tell you how you should run it. Oh, but if you want more information about what I was thinking when I made the character, page 31 has, 3 or 4 paragraphs about that person. But the most I would ever write probably is about 3 or 4 paragraphs with a good lead in. And to me, that's the core of my adventure is these people and what they're trying to achieve. I can always come up with good description for locales and things like that. It's more like creating a web of characters that is interesting, played off against each other. And I don't even really bother to think about too much about, how they interact. I just give them all traits and I assume those traits will somehow interact.
Yeah, if I may, Danny, look, reading, Danny's work, it seems like he does a very good job of conveying a feeling. And especially in a quirky setting, I would say where Gregory does very good with details, Greg does a very good job with conveying the feeling. And I think it can be very, I don't know how to describe it for the especially for the general meander. I mean, the weird stuff feels weird. The people are a little bit, the NPCs feel a little weird. There's nobody that really feels normal. And everything is kind of set in a way that I think provides, like I say, it's a different take, but it definitely comes across with a different flavor, where they both do a good job providing details, but it's a different direction.
What do you think? What makes an NPC interesting in an adventure, Danny?
Well, I like to exaggerate one aspect, like really exaggerate it. Because I figure if I tell somebody that someone is stark raving mad, if they don't want to play that way, that's okay. They can step it back to less stark, less raving, less mad. But I feel like if I give them the furthest out that I thought was appropriate, then they can dial it in back, you know. And then as far as an NPC is just someone who can have dramatic effects on the story that don't necessarily originate from the players. Although it should probably it should originate from the players' interactions. That's fine. But I don't want everything to be within the agency of the players. There should be things that fall outside. They just have to live with. Like, the bad guy killed all those people in the village. Well, what can we do to stop it? Nothing. It's done. Like you have to live with that. And that makes an interesting NPC, one that's ruthless. He gets there ahead of you and he does terrible things. You have to deal with that now. I don't know if that answers the question.
I think so. Like I like the idea that like I don't know that I've ever thought of it in that distilled down to that form, but NPCs having to have one key interesting thing and have to have agency to manipulate the story with or without the PC's involvement. Like yeah, but I think I agree with that those are the most interesting types of characters to come across. One that's of no consequence is either going to be frustrating to the players because they recognize it has no consequence and so they don't understand why they're there interacting. Or two, it's frustrating for the GM because they know that character is of no consequence and yet time's being wasted in the interaction there as well. Um, I don't think either side likes the idea of, hey, we're killing time with something that doesn't affect anything else and is not connected and is going to get forgotten and abandoned as soon as we walk away.
Yeah, and I think Greg made that same point differently. Don't make the massive to do about the bronze sconce if the bronze sconce has nothing to do with anything. If it could be peripherally attached, fine. But if you're just doing it to like delay the players from getting from point A to point B, I think that's what it ends up being, right? We're just delaying the players the capability of exercising their agency. And if you do that too often, people kind of start to withdraw out of the game. I don't know. That's been
Yeah,
my
I like it.
experience.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking about, Jeff, with this duo that we have here is I think that maybe by design, but you tell me what you think. I was interested to chat with these two fellows tonight because they're kind of I won't say certainly on the opposite ends of the spectrum, but definitely on two different ends of the spectrum where I think Greg writes typically, though I think you have some mothership stuff that would show a different side. But you typically write like very interesting, but I would call them like classic type stories, or kind of like this is a positive thing, but like very like drop in fantasy,
Hmm.
accessible.
That's fair.
Um,
Yeah.
Secret of the Whispering God is definitely that, right? Like there's lots of interesting things, but you could drop Secret of the Whispering God into the your kind of standard fantasy setting and it would
Hmm.
work just fine.
Hmm.
Um, whereas Danny, I think that like there's a couple people that do this where and you're one of them, where I read your stuff and I say it would be dangerous to drop a Danny module or a Danny story into a standard fantasy setting because at the end of this storyline, your setting is not going to be the same. Um, and I love both of these because I sometimes I need things that I could just drop in, and I think there are other times where I'm like, I want to run something that my players have never experienced before, um, and kind of push my setting in a new direction, and I think that it's really interesting that we
I should say
yeah
that's an interesting viewpoint. I never really thought about that literally at all.
sure
And even now I'm having a hard time thinking about it that way. But I I tend to think of it like you're wandering into this place and you're going to bump into a bunch of people on your way across the party floor, right? You're on your way to get more rum punch, right? And you're going to run into all sorts of interesting people on the way over to the rum punch. And some of these people will pick your pockets. Some of these people are gathering intel. Some of these people are thinking, I'd like to crush this guy's skull. Some people are praying for your soul. Depending on who you run into, is what's going to. And I don't care. I don't have a story. I just have the elements of a story. And then it's my job to kind of like just say, oh, Gregory seems interested in the Countess. And he's had 3 conversations with her. So she was not a pivotal person. The person he should have been talking to was Count Dwight, right? But that's not how it worked out. So now I got to shift all the Count Dwight stuff over onto the princess.
That guy's a
And now
jerk.
we're gonna go.
Yeah.
We're gonna go there. We're gonna go from there because Gregory's engaged with that. You know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
One of the things I learned so much from was I saw a live game, my first ever live D&D game at MagicCon this year, and it was the cast members from Baldur's Gate, and the
Cool.
yeah, oh, it was terrific. It was really cool, and the dungeon master, and needless to say, I've just blanked on her name, so I will come back to you on that. Um, Embarrassingly. But the dungeon master basically said very far into the show that this thing started going off the rails during the call to action. And the dungeon master said, my adventure outline was your group picks up a bag, takes it across to Baldur's Gate, delivers it, gets paid 100 gold pieces. That's it. And she knew, and I don't doubt that there was some Abria Iyengar, that's it. She was a master class though in taking what they were reacting to and taking their shenanigans and just folding it in. Like she let them write the adventure and
Yes.
she just ran it for them.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I was like, I was entertained by the shenanigans because the cast knows each other and likes each other. And they've got good grips on their characters and they were having fun just acting, right? And she was taking all of that chaos and give pushing it and molding it like clay. And she was incredible. Like I I've been running D&D for a while and I steal from everybody regularly. But it's been
Yes.
I will I will admit it's been a while since I've watched a DM at work and say, "Wow, I can really learn from this person." And Abria, my hat's off to you because I was taking notes for just letting them take control of it. It is a beautiful thing to see, and it is something that every dungeon master should pay attention to because that keeps you from railroading, right? You know,
Yeah.
you don't say, but what about the door on the right? You know, but this door on the left looks so interesting. Yeah, but the door on the right is right over here. You know, it's like,
And you said something interesting there. You said you talked about molding like clay and allowing the players to mold the adventure, and you kind of facilitating that. Jeff, that sparked it in me. Like so, and again, we're not necessarily talking about these two adventures only tonight, but they're a good touch point. You have these two crazily different adventures that you put together for for this most recent project. And I'm curious, as the role of a publisher, do you see your role like the GM in allowing the writers to mold like clay the direction of the product, or do you see, or how do you, I don't actually know how you handle as a guide the process of adventure creation as a publisher.
Well, I think that there's really a couple things. I mean, one is the system that you're writing for. So there's generally, especially with smaller systems, there's a certain expectation. So, um, like for instance, like Old School Essentials tends to be pretty open and free with with various settings. But like DCC or you're doing a sword and sorcery, it tends to have a certain feeling. So I mean,
Mm.
I think there are certain types of, you know, there's just certain types of writing that probably fit better with certain types of game systems because of expectations. There may be, I think even with 5e, even though people do a lot of different things with it, there's still a pretty much a setting in mind and a tone in mind, even though people do, branch off and create their own. So I guess for me, I want to make sure that one is that, that it is tonally and kind of directionally uh, in the direction that is with the system, but I also don't necessarily want to feel that it has to be enslaved to that.
Yeah. Is
My
it the,
experience, let me just, if you don't mind, Zach, I just want to say
yeah, yeah.
my experience with Jeff. So I'll embarrass Jeff now
Mm,
with praise. Jeff was extremely patient with me.
mm.
He was extremely nice about a lot of things that uh, at the end, I felt like Jeff was like hitting me with a baseball bat, following me down into the cellar, and then closing the door and trying to get the lock on it. But while I continued to like try to escape from the basement, which is all a good thing. And he was super good about the whole thing, really gave me a lot of great pointers, helped me rearrange my thinking on a bunch of stuff. Um, a good editor, is part of it too. These two things will hang together
100%.
because Jeff's a good editor and he sees commonality in this bundle, right? So he knows there's things that are shared and things that are going to be very different. And he's giving people the opportunity to have both. So I think it's an unsung job, but it's a really good one, especially with wild men like me running around in the wilds.
Yeah, and I think the thing is, a lot of people who write adventures like to write. And so it's sometimes just a matter of paring things down and it makes sure that the experience from the person running the game is I guess I won't say consistent, but they're able to follow along and be able to follow through a path, even though it doesn't have to necessarily be a railroad. But it's very easy for I think writers just to because they love writing is to keep writing, and sometimes it's not necessarily conducive always to a being able to efficiently run a game.
And
Uh,
honestly, and I'll stop after this. Honestly, too, it's if we trust Zach's statement that most adventures which are purchased are never run, we are not producing adventures for GM solely. We are producing them to be read and digested as artifacts in their own right, whether they're run or not. So it behooves us. That's why shit like sorry,
It's
stuff
okay.
like Mork Borg, uh, uh, at least partially does well because it just looks so cool. You don't have to play that game to enjoy that game. You can just look at the supplements and be like, wow, man, they didn't have nothing like this in 1982. Uh, so I think there's that part too. We should all think carefully about how we present our stuff. And Jeff is the kind of person who's going to help us find ways to get it out there in a form that looks cool and is a digestible object.
I'd like to take a quick second because something Zach said earlier reminded me of someone who's been very influential on me. I am dropping an image in the chat, which if we can put that up there. But Joel Hines, you know him. Something that was very influential when I read his Mothership adventure, Desert Moon of Karth.
Mm,
Uh, he
I,
has, so it's a sandbox,
yep.
right? But there's a storyline in the sandbox, and he has this is what happens if the players do nothing,
Yes. I
right?
have that in my book.
That was a huge influence on me. I don't necessarily put that in every adventure. I didn't put in the Whispering God adventures because the players are not going to do nothing, it being a sword and sorcery
Right.
adventure. But I have an
Right.
idea, like this is what, this is what happens. But his thing is, he tells the GM if the players don't do anything, if players like they show up on the moon, they go to the bar and they just drink for 3 days, then all of this stuff happens in this order, at this timeline. And so the GM knows when these are the things that the players can mess with.
Yes.
These are the things like, so if, well, these two NPCs on day two, these two NPCs meet. Well, if the player characters have killed one of them or befriended one of them or whatever, that event is going to change because of what the players do.
Yes.
Any or all of those events. And, so it's kind
So
of the
what
opposite of
sounds
what Abria did. It's a complex storyline, but it gives the GM say, when the players do stuff, this is what's going to change.
Yeah, it just sounds to me like there is a railroad in there, but it's the main thing that really has nothing to do with the players unless the players want to
Right.
engage in it.
It's a
Because not everything,
railroad if the players do nothing, but that's
right,
not going to happen.
right. And something I've always been taken with the idea of the types of players that there are, right?
Mm,
And I think that not every player wants a ton of agency.
mhm.
We
I'm
we 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 bow at this altar of agency, but quite frankly, there's a
Oh man.
whole bunch of people that are
Oh
super
man.
happy to jump on the choo-choo and go right on down the track.
I'm happy that when I play games, if I know there's a railroad, I will help the GM and keep
Me
the
too. Me
train
No,
going.
too.
no, because particularly from running D&D like for
Yeah.
years, and this is a thing I actually try to put into my adventures because it is so vexing for the players. Players hate not knowing what the right choice is.
Right.
you know
Right.
there are, all right, so you can take, so you arrive at a crossroads and you can take the mountain path, and it looks a little more difficult, but it might get you there. It looks a little bit more difficult, but it's shorter. Or you can take the wandering glade path and it looks easier, but it might take more time. So, which path do you take? And they're like, well, what's the best one? I'm like, I don't know, or, like literally, even in a case like that, the DM in that case presents, right? Shorter,
Right.
more difficult, longer, easier, right? So there are pros and cons to each. It could just be two roads diverge into the wood, and what happens on the path I don't take, who knows? Um,
Yeah.
I wrote an adventure for I actually just ran it because we're running season 10 of Adventurers League at my friendly local game store, and I wrote a dungeon craft where the quest giver says, I want you to check these two locations um to find the thing I want. And so hashtag spoilers for anyone running this Thundercraft, but unbeknownst to the players, whichever one they do, and they say, I don't know which one's more important, you pick, I don't care. Just check out those two places, and check back with me in the middle of them. And what the players don't know is whichever one they choose, they won't do the other one. They'll go back to the quest giver, and the quest giver will say, "Hey, wait, no, neither. I've got a better idea. Do thing three." So, but they
Yeah.
think it's going to be the adventure structure is going to be, sorry, check place A, check place B, go on to the boss fight. And that is what it is, but place B is not the other place that the quest giver talked about. And both places drop the same magical item. So there's no wrong choice to that.
Well, you could
It's
Right.
always
just,
make if you're solving a murder mystery and you have 10 suspects, it could always be the third one they go after is going to be the killer.
oh, um,
It's like,
one of the best adventures I have run, um, was one of the Dragonlance adventures, and it is a murder mystery. And I do not want to spoil this, but it is highly unlikely that the players will pick the actual guilty party. But it is designed so that the players will focus on one of the NPCs. But it is a great thing because that absolutely goes to Danny's point. This adventure is but by Janine Hempy is brilliant at presenting NPCs that not every NPC. The players aren't
Right.
going to care about all 8 of them,
Right.
but there's one of them that the players are going to say, that's probably the guilty one, and that's probably the innocent one that we have to make sure doesn't get blamed for all of this. And those and the way the adventure is designed, it's like those become the important characters. The players pick them. The GM doesn't. And there is and one of the things that makes it such a brilliant adventure is that it pays off at the end because there are story beats for all of the NPCs so that the ones that the players are important to the players get their moment in the sun. And I've run this, it's table after table at cons and whatnot, and the players are just like, yes, yeah, when that person gets something good happen to them. And it's an NPC, right? It like they don't get anything for that. Their characters don't get anything for it, but from a story perspective, it's so satisfying.
I want to walk back a minute to something Danny was talking about. Danny, you were talking about you're commending Jeff, I think, at the moment, but you were talking about Jeff like helping you like refine the story or refine the adventure, cutting things down or knowing when to finish it up or how to tie it up, those types of concepts. Jeff, do you see that as Danny used the word editor. Do you see that as your as your main responsibility in this, or how do you see your own role in getting one of these adventures out the door?
So I don't know if it's what it is I have, but I one of the problems I have a lot of times is following purchase adventures, if they're too convoluted. In the past, when I started publishing, I just took adventures, put them into a zine format, and it just reformatted the whole thing. So I think for me, I'm using, because I don't think that I think for me, if things aren't done in a certain way, I have a hard time following. And so I think I'm the lowest common denominator. So if I can make it so that it makes sense to me, then it should be good for everybody.
I would say that you definitely did that for me.
Me too. Just having me sink an entire island into the sea.
Jeff kept saying to me, he's like, yeah, I just want a little 12-pager. I guess, with pictures, it's probably more like 16. And then I'd write a bunch more stuff. Well, we can't really get rid of this either. So maybe it'll be about 22. He goes, this might be a book.
Yeah, that was actually for both of you, was the idea is we do some short ones and you guys put in the first manuscript and it's like, well, that was a nice idea, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do it either one. And that was fine.
One of the things too that we were talking about is, or when we first talked about doing this show, was the difference between writing for OSR style stuff. I mean, I know that's a broad term. I'm not trying to get haters.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you know what I mean? And so this brings up an interesting thing to me. When we were talking earlier about don't pre-program too much, I really like the idea about the hidden railroad. I'm going to definitely steal that. But don't pre-plan the adventure too much. And this is where my antipathy, well, it's a general antipathy toward too much lore, too much content, because you're going to give it, and then sometimes the game gets simpler as it goes along. Like, as you're playing along, suddenly a lot of that stuff is superfluous or could be just somebody wanting to write 12 paragraphs about their world or whatever. And they're remembering stuff from that's not really germane to the game. I don't need to know about the king from 100 years ago unless he's a ghost in this game. So there's a lot of economy in OSR writing because you're not encouraged to do all that work. You're encouraged to create interesting, like a stew pot almost. And the players jump in and then they just float around encountering things until clues start to accrete, more or less. So I don't know what. To me, I like that short format because it doesn't make me dig in too deep with any one idea and sell it to the players too hard. It's more loose, and then they just indicate to me what they like or don't like.
Yeah. Well, let me follow up on that then, because we've been talking about these two adventures. So and the thing about these adventures are you just brought it up, Danny. Like they started off as 12 pagers, but they actually ended up being double that, triple that, right? And kind of whatever they needed to be is what they became. I want to, and I loved hearing from you guys that like that allowance of like, you have Jeff there to refine, but these can be what they need to be is great. Then you step into the adventures that I had you write, which are you must hit a certain word count and no
Oh my
more.
God,
And
I
dude.
loved that challenge. I
I
love
was
it.
removing backspaces. I was using semicolons.
but do you find like that's the opposite side of this, which is that the adventure cannot be whatever you need it to be. It must be able to fit into this format, this template, and this space. And you said you love it, but like, do you find that those constraints ask you to tell different types of stories or ask you to write adventures in different ways? Or I see one person nodding and one person shaking, so
Yeah,
I'm
I'll let
interested in that.
Gregory go first.
Oh, go, no, go ahead. Go ahead. Absolutely.
Well, I was just going to simply say that if it was a perfect world and time didn't matter,
Sure.
I would write the whole story out and then I would make an outline and I would sell the outline. I would write the story so that I could get the adventure written right. And then I would go back and say, nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that. This is cooler. This is better. Have three things here instead of one. Uh, Remember to tell people about stakes. This is my big thing that I do all the time. When they have to choose those two paths in the wood, Gregory, I say the stakes are this. If you climb that hill and you fall down, you will die.
Mm.
If you go down this path toward the river, it is going to take you 3 days and you are going to be covered in mosquito bites. What do you want? You don't get into the difficulty level or anything like that because you don't need to in an OSR. You can just say one path goes up and it's really dangerous. And then you write some little quip that's like, seriously, make it really dangerous. and then you give them a spark table or something like that to generate their little, you fall and hit 12 rocks or whatever. That's the stuff I love about that
Roll
OSR writing.
1d4 per rock.
1d4 per rock, exactly.
You might
So
live.
I don't know. I love the brevity. I love the 1, 2, 3 prompts. All that stuff's the stuff I've just been waiting to be revealed to me all my life, and now it is. So I'm happy to be alive.
Yeah. One of the things that the way I approached it was like a high concept, like a movie, is that you only had room in this for the elevator pitch. You
Yep.
had like there is like this very specific situation. There are a bunch of rooms. Some of the rooms are going to be completely empty,
Yep.
or something the GM can fill in if they feel necessary. But this is the absolute essential of this adventure. There are um, there's this creature that wants treasure or food or whatever. And so they want adventurers to come in or they want it to scare adventurers away, however that works. And then everything has to be set up. You have a sentence or two to describe every room, a room that isn't an empty room. And everything has to revolve around what's happening there. And I loved the challenge. I did not I don't think I picked out. Yeah, no, actually I did. I picked out one page.
Yeah.
Like we had opportunities to do one page or two, even two pages, and I did a pair of one pages just to get it to as slim
I
as
totally envied
possible.
that, man. I could not do it.
Well,
I
and then
tried.
Zach gave me a two pager, so, and that was an entirely different set of
Well, it's
challenges.
funny. It's funny because I think you three are very interesting. I'll add Jeff in here now because all three of you wrote for it. All four of us wrote for it, of course, but like all three of you wrote for it. And it was funny looking at the three of you.
Devoured Labyrinth also on Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But what was fun, everybody, we had like 19 writers, so everybody had a unique thing. But one of the things that Andrew and I talked about was like, and I was like, I could have told you this from the beginning, right? Like that when I talked to him, I'm like, I could have told you that about these three guys from the beginning. Uh, Greg, I think you wrote 50% more words than you needed to on both of them, but the ideas were succinct enough that it was very easy to pare it down to what we needed, right? So
Thank
you wrote a
goodness.
ton, which is exactly what we've been talking about, right? Which is that you like to over give on GMs, but and so we just had to get rid of some of those red herrings that you brought up at the beginning and things like that. But it was very much like, oh, this is like even in this small of a space, this one page adventure, you get the sense of Greg's style coming through. Because when I say overwrit by 50%, that's still only like 200 words. It's like nothing. So that's an accidental paragraph, right? Like that's nothing. Um, and
Accidental
then
Paragraph is the name of my new
Accidental
band,
paragraph
actually.
is
Yeah.
that's
yeah,
a I'm
exactly.
stealing that one too.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, and then Danny, yours was like it had all of the like I would say that like there were three people in the writers group, and I'll talk, and maybe a fourth. I'll talk about that one in a second. But there were three people that I said having these three people in our book dramatically adds variety to what we produce because everything's amazing in this. But if everybody else was in, but we removed those three people, it would feel like mm, you know Zach could have written this one, John could have written this one. You could mix and match authors, and it'd be like, yeah, maybe you would tell, maybe you wouldn't. But Danny, you, Zach, Allen, and Nate Southard came in and just gave us like really off the wall, not in like we can't have this or unmanageable way, but like new takes on everything. And that was great. And I think
Thanks,
what
man.
all, th yeah, I think what all three of you did, which was interesting, and I think you see some of this in Gentle Meander too, is that you also like to um, create, um, what's the right way of saying this? Situations, encounters or situations that are almost like puzzles that you have to sort your way out of. Um, and it's not like you lay out a puzzle always and like these are the constraints of the puzzle. This is the boundary. There's no changes from this, no deviations. This is the answer. But it is like, here's this situation that you're going to end up, the party's going to end up funneling into, and you don't have a great answer for how to get out of it. The players certainly aren't going to have a great answer for how
I
to get out of
frequently
it.
don't have any idea.
But yeah, but they're gonna, but the situation, they're gonna come out the other side, and they're gonna be like, I've never had an encounter like that. And I think those are some of the best things that you can have in a anthology is those things that are completely off the beaten path. So I was really happy about that one, and I was like, oh, you can see Danny in this, even though I had seen some of your writing and other things before. I'm like, oh, this is exactly what I've expected from Danny. The funny thing is, Jeff, I you write in Gary's appendix, you write the expanded bestiary. So I knew uh writing wise that you had the caliber to do something interesting in there. But what I was not expecting was I have this really weird idea and it doesn't fit the format and I'm gonna throw it at you, and it became like one of the weirdest things in the anthology. So much so that it was put in like one of three things that got pulled out of the core anthology and moved to the bonus section because it's like this is important and we love it, but it doesn't belong at all, even in the midst of all the other adventures. Um, And so
Wow,
now
Jeff. Right
yeah, now
on,
I have to
man.
like imagine I have to be like, well, if I ever need a weird thing, I thought it was going to be Danny that I would call, but maybe now it's Jeff with
We spent the better part of a year together. I think we're rubbing off on each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just so on that end, I think I know what sort of adventure Greg and Danny would write at this point in their style. But Jeff, what do you like to write in adventures or tell if you as a GM?
I think that's a good question. So I've not really. I'm trying to think as far as very few actual adventures. I think in my mind is I think in scenes, and I just want to think of something that provides an experience for the players that is weird or different. That's not just a something typical. And it's like when I was playing running a sword and sorcery game a long while back, and I made some remark. They went into somebody's tent or saw something, and I made some joke. I made some remark about somebody pulling off somebody's head and carrying it in their hands. They're like, really? I was like, no, just kidding. And I realized at that moment that that was way more interesting to have just seeing somebody walk up and pull somebody's head off and walk away is more interesting than anything that I had planned. And I really don't even have to really do anything like hard or figure out, the math on monsters. But sometimes you just do something weird and it'll capture people's imaginations and they'll want to interact with it and it'll be memorable.
They'll
And
certainly take ogres more seriously.
yeah.
I think it's a huge note for adventure writing that you said like something they haven't seen before. I know that's something that's come up several times during our chat this evening. Like I think there is no bigger hallmark of good adventure design than that. Not just for the players, but for the reader or the GM. Like give us something that we haven't seen before. If you are approaching an adventure with that as the foremost objective, or whether that's a sword and sorcery adventure or that's a a body horror or weird horror or whatever, um, if you're saying what can I give you that's new, if you can achieve new and nothing else, that's still memorable. Um, and I think valuable because as GMs, I think we often get into there's always at least a temptation of just, oh, the next session's coming on. We can just flip a switch in our brain and run a D&D
Well,
pretty, like just go,
well,
right? And
like
not
like the Sunless Citadel. I played it on Neverwinter Nights. I never played 3.5. Have you guys played the Sunless Citadel?
I've run it.
Yeah, so there's one.
I've run it too.
So there's an area where this dragon had breathed in this area like hundreds of years ago, but it's still smoldering. Like that sticks in my head.
Mhm.
That crazy
yeah,
kobold
Mhm.
Meepo
yeah,
is like amazing. And then the idea that they staked a vampire in the heart and then it grew into a tree, like
yeah.
that is
Mhm.
like three visual thing. I'm not a visual person, but that's like, well, maybe Meepo's not visual, but those are like three really great things that I'm not exactly sure how he did that in a way that I never stopped thinking about that.
Exactly. Like that's the juice because I think the thing that I think about a lot as a GM is my biggest fear as a GM is doing a session that everybody forgets in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Um, that's the thing that I don't want. And that still happens, right? Like I'm certainly not averse to that. And I'll
Yeah, you
end a
can't.
session, I'll walk into the other room and Megan will say, "How did tonight go?" I'm like, "I think it was pretty forgettable. I'm gonna try to make it better next week." But like, if you ask the players, they're probably like, "Oh, it was fine. It was good. I had a good time. We had a
Yeah.
fun encounter." But they don't remember anything next time, and that's a good adventure remedies that by
Mm.
providing you, even if nothing else, even if you never run that adventure, there is at least a spark of uniqueness, of originality that maybe you can carry into whatever you're doing in your next session.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know, Jeff, have we like what else do we want to cover as far as adventures?
Well, I guess the question is, but maybe maybe would take extra long. But I guess the I guess when you have an idea, I mean, do you do you work from a structure? Like I would probably work from some ideas and work around that and try and connect them. But I mean, for you two or you three, like do you like figure out an ending and work backwards? Do you outline the whole thing? I mean, what's the I guess as far as the what's the methodology that you use?
I always start with sitting down and asking what's my unique thing. Sometimes a unique thing is an idea. Like I love your descriptions of the like the dragon scorched terrain or whatever. Like sometimes it's that, right? Like I have this idea. Sometimes it's a I want to run or I want to write interesting mechanics for siege warfare or whatever. And I want to use this whole adventure to kind of like show off that. Like sometimes it's mechanically based unique idea and sometimes it's like flavor story-wise unique idea or a character, a monster, but starting with a unique idea. Um and then typically what I do is I like to write like the back of the book text. Like, what's the pitch for this?
Mm.
So, oh, I know, like I'll use my Pyroborg one, but like, oh, I know that there's this ship that's floating across the Caribbean, and it's got a bunch of ash addicts, and they've got a meat grinder full of zombies in the hold. All right, I know that that's a fun idea, but how do I communicate that? Because if I can communicate it well in like back of the book style,
Mm.
what then I think the idea has solidified enough that I can sit down and write it. If I can't write the back, then for me it's like I can't write the back. I probably need to stew on it a bit more till it becomes clear. So cool idea, back of the book. Then I typically do like a template, build out a template so I have a general sense of the size of the thing and how I want it to read, like what's the formatting of everything. And then the thing I do that's probably I don't know, maybe the weirdest is I then bounce around. It's super rare for me to start at point A and work
Mm.
to point Z. I mean, I see a nod, so maybe I'm not weird, but like it's very
You're
typical
weird.
for me to
No, you're
start at,
weird. Yeah.
okay, fair enough. But start at Q, then go to D, then go to J, then write ABC, then write XYZ, and then come back and then kind of massage it a little bit at the end to make sure that like, okay, does it actually feel like it has a through line? But I don't know. That's probably as close as I'm going to get to an answer.
One of the things I do is I think about tropes, right? I think about what and tropes are tools. And so sometimes you use those tropes, right? Sometimes you want to present something that the players are going to recognize, right? Oh, this is the damsel in distress. This is but the one of the things that I try to do at least once in every adventure is subvert a trope, which is, that the players will go in, they will see the situation, they will have this expectation, but it won't be. I love things are not as they appear. And because again, players like to have information and they like to think that they're operating on, they hate ambiguity. They hate there are two doors. You have no idea. One door leads to treasure, one door leads to death. Open one. And they're like, well, can I listen? Sure. They're silent. But when they think they know what's happening, and it turns, and that's not what's happening, it leads to some really interesting stuff. Uh, and you can have a lot of fun with that. And there's so many things that that seem obvious because you're playing off of an existing trope that you can manipulate the player. Again, it's not railroading, but you're communicating things and you're manipulating the players in a good way. You're always manipulating the players because as a game master, you're presenting all of the information to the players. And so by manipulating what you present to them, you manipulate their reactions in a way that will be fun and weird and interesting.
Do
And you
you
still have the control to not manipulate those actions. If they
Sure.
come up with a better action, you just step
Oh,
back. I mean,
I want to give a shout out to a another thing that I have stolen from in every subsequent adventure that I've written. Winter's Flame. It was a holiday special D&D Adventurers League adventure, a little 2 hour piece of fluff. And the climax of the adventure is there's an ice golem that has formed a friendship with a fire snake, but the problem is the ice golem's mere coldness, it's a construct, and its coldness is killing the fire snake. So it can't be with its friend because its friend is dying just every
Mhm.
time it gets close to it. And there's this gem in the thing's chest that makes it cold. And the players have to get the gem out of its chest. And you know, that's the kind of thing the game master will write a puzzle and they will say, oh, it's a DC 15 thieves tools check, or oh, if they have this piece of equipment they can do it, or whatever, right? That they will come up with this very specific. The adventure said whatever the players come up with works. Just that.
Yeah.
Bam. And I'm just,
Yeah.
that is genius. That is
Yes.
genius because you present that. And again, the players are invested in these two characters. So they're like, oh, blah, 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 you know, we'll make a plan. And you'll have the crowbar and I'll cast some fire magic and blah, 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 blah. And you're just sitting back and like, yeah, it might work. You know, but then when they do it, it's like, yeah, okay, roll some dice and sure, you know, hey, oh, that's awesome. But letting the players grab that, so now a lot of times I do have a solution in mind, but it will be like I will always put in there or any plausible solution the players come up with also works, right? Because now, I
Yeah.
mean, something stupid doesn't work, right? But um
That's what we really need in there, Greg. We don't need the anything plausible works. We need the stupid ideas
Yeah.
don't work. Like
Nothing
Right.
just
stupid. Nothing stupid.
That's going to be in the frontispiece from now on. Dear
the
GM, stupid ideas won't work in this adventure.
that's right. Do you start at the beginning and work forward, Greg,
Who
or
me?
do
Who
you?
me?
Yeah, yeah.
No, I don't. I do outline. Um, And one of the things I am finding out in this current thing I'm writing for Jeff is that I was maybe a little bit more of a slave to the outline than I should have been. But I do outline, but this particular thing I skipped between the front and the back. And Jeff, and again, Jeff knows what I'm talking about here. This piece that we're talking about right now is the last thing that I wrote. It was the thing that kind of where they meet in the middle, and there has to be that linchpin, but it was. And Jeff, as a good editor, has set me on a better path because I think like that, like I should have thrown out the outline. I should have thought of a different way to connect point A and point Z. But we're on a good path now. But because it just, I put a lot of effort into it, but it didn't work. And again, so that is one thing. Those of you
Oh,
watching this, if you're putting a lot of effort into it and it's not working, those are the gods telling you something.
Yeah, you are the problem.
Well, but the thing is, we can just take what was written and just put it into a third island. So it's not like,
Oh yeah, no, we'll get it. We
yeah,
we absolutely came up with a solution. It almost worked. It almost
yes,
worked. It was just being, it was like again, it was being a slave to the outline. It was not thinking outside the box and just saying, instead of having part one, two, and three, part one, two, three, and four, like I have these four parts.
yeah.
Well, what if we just had three? Oh, bam, right there you go. It works. So,
I'll tell you. I'll tell you. This is gonna I hope this infuriates you as much as it infuriated me. I was recently at Chaosium Con and I was sitting in on a panel that Mike Mason was putting on. So Mike
mm,
Mason is like a line editor, I think,
it does
for
infuriate me that you were at that panel and I
yeah,
wasn't.
yeah,
So,
exactly. Um, so he was talking about designing good Call of Cthulhu adventures,
mm,
and he did this fantastic job of like talking about like engaging with the audience and like talking about how you come up with the premise and some of the toned and tropes. I mean, tropes came up like a lot of things that you were saying there, Greg. But then I think he looked up and saw that he only had like 30 minutes left on his panel. I don't know. But he said, all right, and now we're in the middle. And he's like, the middle is where you find the clues. And everybody knows how to write good clues and how those string together, right? And he like dead serious. He's like, yep, okay. And now so we're gonna skip through clues because that's the easiest part, and we're gonna talk about the ending. And I was like, I am so angry. As much
Everybody
as I
knows how
love
to
you.
write their ending.
Yes, but I like the hardest part is often the middle. That connective glue,
Mm.
that that
Yeah.
that fulcrum, that pivot point that gets you from exploration or general discovery into that downhill plunge towards the ending. That's the hardest point to get the buy-in because you need that buy-in, you need those clues, you need that fulcrum to work so that people have the buy-in for the end to have the weight. And anyhow, I was like, so it was very gratifying for you. You kind of like made up for the Chaosium panel, Greg, by talking about how the middle is the most challenging part. Because that's definitely the way I see it.
Oh yeah,
Hold on, guys. I have a. Is that my phone?
that's not
Okay.
mine.
No, that's weird. But some sort of alert came through on my phone. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not a tornado alert.
If it is, what are you gonna do?
It's been nice knowing you, Danny. You're a
Yeah.
great guy.
If my hat suddenly
Oh,
goes,
I'm speaking of that middle part, by the way, I'm gonna throw out there an entirely different game system, but that has been hugely influential to me, particularly when it comes to writing D&D adventures, because this is a flaw you are gonna not, not to slam D&D or anything, but it's a flaw that you're going to find in a lot of D&D adventures because it's the way that they're written. Um, the Gumshoe System by Robin Laws. I played a game of Nice Black Agents, right? That use
Yeah.
that system, but the Gumshoe System is the characters always get the clue. The
that's right.
characters always
Always.
find what they need to move on. And so this is again, when I write D&D adventures, I work really hard to make sure that nothing the players have to do is hidden behind a skill check that they could fail. Because
Right.
I have seen so many.
Yes.
I run a lot of organized play, and because again, you think there is a clue. They must do
Yeah.
something to earn that clue. So it is a DC 15 investigation check to find that clue. Well, great. You have four barbarians and a druid. And they none of them are trained in investigation, and intelligence is a dumb stat on two of them. And nobody rolled more than a 10.
Right.
So the adventure stops
Right.
because, and that is something I go back and look at constantly. Like now but what now? That doesn't mean that what they give that clue to you for free, right? It like you always get it, but maybe if you make a good roll, you get it faster. You get bonus information. You also learn about the trap at the entrance, right?
Hmm.
You find the map,
Yep.
but you also learn that something happened. Uh,
You
you
can't always get what you want.
right.
But you get what
Uh,
you need.
you get what you need,
Woo!
but like yeah, like you have to find the secret door to get to the rest of the adventure, or you have to persuade someone to give you the map or something. Any that what like you talk about, Zach, the fulcrum. If you that cannot be a dice roll. That
Right.
cannot
Yeah.
be in any way variable
Right.
because your best investigator is going to roll a one and
Yep.
then you're stuck. And so,
Yep.
like, I mean, you at the very least you have to like, sure, okay, they roll a one, so it takes them extra time, and like the bad guys get a jump on them. Bad guys now have advantage on initiative because they're prepared. They got there first.
Yep.
Whatever. There can be a penalty for that, but you can't stop them.
Yeah, fully agree. Danny, I think we have time here. I think. What on your end? How do you write an adventure? Do you start at the beginning? Do you start with an outline? Do you just dive
Well,
in and see where it goes?
this will certainly, my process is very brief. And this will come as no surprise. Gregory might be the only person who doesn't know me well enough to know that this is how it works. Um, I will see a blueberry and a hummingbird and like a broken rock, and I will just make notes of those things. And at some point, I will just write those down and start writing about those things. And the blueberries turn into little kobolds. They're blue, not red. Why is that? And then I write a little bit about them. And I think I do want some kobolds in my game, but if I didn't, I would just change them to goblins. And I just slowly work up until I've got enough core pieces where I'm like, these goblins would hate these villagers, but these villagers have this woman who knows how to talk to the goblins. And then I start writing about that. And it's about the relationship between these characters. And at a certain point, I'll start drawing a map. And that just sort of happens on the right-hand part of my desk. I just start drawing maps, and I typically make like a mind map where I'll just write all the people, all the events, all the locations that I want. And then I just use colored markers to connect them with lines. And then I'm like, oh man, everything is focused on this one old woman in town. That's where I would use your rule, Gregory, and say, yeah, everybody thinks she's a sweet old woman, but she's in fact a crone, a hag, and she's planning on decimating this village using these blue goblins, and it starts making sense to me. And there's never a story, but there are story-like elements that people can, like, I would call it like a pseudo story. It's not, it doesn't have to be necessarily done in order. And it doesn't necessarily need to have every piece present in order to be fulfilling. And then I start writing. So I'll just write, edit, delete. I do all the bad habits. I edit while I write. I mean, the list is endless. But what that affords me is I don't have to be concrete about anything until I've got a pretty good idea of the whole thing in my head. So I do a lot of the getting it all in my head. And then the writing of it is fairly straightforward. Like especially OSR stuff. I love how brief it is. Like Hemingway is my god. So brevity is the soul of wit. We want to, I always want that to be the case, even if I'm writing a more verbose D&D style adventure. I would say they're a little more verbose. And kind of at that point, I start polishing all the stuff. Like I'll really work on that relationship between the old woman and the blue goblins who have hummingbird scouts. Oh yeah, the hummingbirds, right. Okay, yeah, so the hummingbirds come back in and they're the scout drones for the blue goblins. And I just have a long list of interesting, weird ideas, and I just keep sticking them in until there's too many, and then I pull some out, and and it just kind of goes back and forth until I have one that feels about right. And then I give it to Jeff, or I give it to Zach, or I give it to Bruce, and they go, I have no freaking clue what you are talking about here, dude. like everything was going along great, and then you said they went into some mystic stream, and there was like Marshmallow Men. And I'm like, yeah, don't you think Marshmallow Men would be cool? No one will understand what that is. So, and then I stop writing.
Once you reach Marshmallow Men, it's time to stop.
Yeah. When you hit marshmallow, that's a word of advice to everyone. Steal that if you will. If you can start coming up with Marshmallow Man, say, I'm going to go have a s'more. I'm just going to go have a s'more and get this out of my system.
The people who wrote the movie The Menu would certainly agree with you.
Yes, exactly. So it's a little more disorganized, which is not super surprising, but I eventually can cohere it. That's kind of how it all comes together. And there always is an idea. The other thing I was going to say in answer to your tropes thing, Gregory, I fully agree. Subvert trope when you can, but subverting them doesn't matter if you don't reinforce them mostly, because you only notice the weird thing when it's weird and not like all the other things. One of my challenges is most of my stuff's weird. So then how do I get an extra pop of weird. I've already got like pickled slugs being sold to you by the gnome artificer. It's like, how can I make that weirder to make it pop? So sometimes I have to take it down a notch on the background, like pull it back in so that my characters can step forward. And most importantly, the players can get in there and start doing their little maneuverings or whatever they're going to do. And I really like having a theme. My themes being sort of an anarchist, libertarian, are really tied up in like autonomy, freedom, that kind of stuff. So all my games are usually written with some sort of overriding theme like that. Like, this is law versus chaos, or this is the king against the oppressed masses, or whatever. And I think that allows people to have like a real background radiation level of like, I'm on this side or that side.
Yeah. Jeff, I'm touching base with you here.
Sorry,
have
I
we
ran
covered
off.
your question? No, you're good. You're great. This has been, I'm really enjoying it. Have we covered what you were looking for there?
Yeah, I think we got a good overview, and I think of different people's approaches and people's styles, and I think in the way they and things that they find interesting. I think we had a lot of fine points. Everything that we needed to, as far as that goes, covered.
Cool. So should we all right, so we talked about these adventures and we're coming to the end. Should we point people to where they can check them out if they want to?
Oh yes, so we have some we have some adventures on Kickstarter. In fact, we got a good deal, so to speak, where you can get 2 zines for OSE, a Gentle Meander and Secret of the Whispering God, for 2 zines together for $30. What a deal!
That's a smoking deal.
I backed it immediately.
If everybody knew how good Greg's adventure was, they would pay twice that easily.
I was going to say that about you, man.
Yeah, see, why didn't you? Next time when you're pricing this thing, Jeff, give us a call.
Yes, exactly.
Because with your Zach's involvement, I think we're up to about $75.
So that's the OSE Adventure Double-Feature, and it's coming to an end pretty quick. So, but the reality, I think, Jeff, is that they will also come to your RPG Ramblings web store pretty quick and drive through shortly thereafter.
Yeah. So really, once after these go and get distributed to the backers, then I'll put them up on the web store for physical copies.
Yeah. And I think it's probably fair to say, like we talked about both of these being old school essentials, but and now I'm definitely pitching. But Greg originally wrote his in DCC, and that's already available. So if you're a DCC person instead of OSE, just go get that one and
go get it.
Yeah, get it tomorrow.
Yes. In anticipation of part 2 that will be coming out possibly this year.
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Working on it.
And also we have the Devoured Labyrinth also. Maybe you can, for those that don't know.
Yeah.
The 7 people out in the world that don't know, Zach, could you explain
there's
Devoured
more than
Labyrinth?
7. There's at least 12. Yeah, Devoured Labyrinth is 40 1- and 2-page adventures for Shadowdark, written in part by all 4 of us here, but quite a few other people. I think I would call it, on my end at least, a labor of love for the Shadowdark system and for the fun that I've had with that for the past year. It's also, like we talked about tonight, I think especially sounds like Danny and I have a real affinity for like extremely brief adventures. And so this is me kind of doubling down on that or to the nth degree and doing a full book of really, really tight things and making that a challenge for every single writer. So yeah, we've got I think that one goes till the 27th. So you got a couple weeks still on that.
I just want to say these. I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I just want to say that all smoke blowing aside, working with both Zach and Jeff, I've had positive and negative things in this industry, and these guys are nothing but love for the game, and they know what's good and what's not, and above all else, they're just pretty reasonably nice people. So and experience. So I just enjoy.
100%
I enjoy working
agree.
with you guys. You're great to work with.
Well, thank you, Danny and Gregory. Yeah, it's been a joy working with you guys too. You both offer quite a bit, and it's been it's I think as a publisher, it's just always interesting to see. Like, I'm not sure what's going to come out, right? So it's
Mm,
like all of a sudden you get the manuscript, it's like, oh, okay, this is
mm.
interesting. There's always a bit of surprise in that discovery.
I was just going to say, if there's ever a 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon game for adventure writing, the Devoured Labyrinth is going to be the linchpin of
Oh,
that whole thing because there's so many people involved in it.
Yeah, yeah.
I look at that list and I
It's
never got it
amazing.
when people would be like on an interview on TV or something. They're like, I was just glad to be there. Like
Yeah.
I was just hanging out by craft services, eating the pineapple, and like it was cool. That's how I feel about that list. I'm just like, damn, I'm in the presence
Yeah.
of some good writing.
It's all my favorite people, save for a few who just, time didn't line up with it, so I'll have to catch them on the next wave. But yeah, it's like I could not be more pleased with the lineup of folks that showed up for that, and that gave me really cool adventures. I mean, like super highlight. I mean, obviously, like it's cool to get like to work anytime I get to work with any of the three of you, that's great. But also like there's people on there who I've never gotten to work with and who have never worked on anything before, really. Like Mike Amer, who is an incredible GM and
Mm.
a very good friend, um, but had never published a single thing. And so we've got his first thing in there, and it's fantastic. It's like, oh, you've obviously been, nobody would guess that this was your first. It feels more like you've been doing it for 20 years. So yeah, I'm just super happy with it, and it'll be delivering within a few weeks after the Kickstarter ends. So I'm excited.
Excellent.
Can't wait.
Okay.
Support the small guys
Yes. Yeah. So we can keep making cool stuff.
so we can
So
keep
That's
making
right.
cool stuff. We'll keep doing it.
yeah.
So just make us feel that love.
Yeah. It's the gasoline that fuels the cool stuff engine.
That's right.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. And
Hey, thanks everybody.
Thank you. Thank
yep,
you for
Thanks,
tuning
Jeff.
in.
yep. And we'll talk again, I'm sure, in the future.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jeff and Zach, for inviting me. It was a real pleasure.
Yep.
Good meeting you, Danny.
Yeah, right on, Greg. I'm sure we'll run into each other at GameholeCon.
You will see me there.
And we will definitely tip one back.
All right. Yep, you're on.